Good afternoon, everybody. We're talking NHL Stanley Cup hockey.
This is Jim Fox from the LA Kings, and you're watching Home Ice Advantage, all hockey talk with Ted Sobel and Jonathan Davis.
And let's not forget about our special guest, whose voice will be extremely familiar to almost every one of you, and you should be ashamed if it's not.
Brought in by Samsonov. Sergei Samsonov cuts. Walks out in front. Thomas the save. They score! What do you say? Guess who? UC Jokinen. Carolina has won Game 3. Stevenson, Bjorkstrand. He scores! That's hockey, baby! Eberle with a shot. He scores! Hey, what do you say? That's Kraken hockey, baby!
That's right. That's Kraken hockey, and you know what that means. Guess who's here? John Forslund. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Ted. JD, how are you? It's great to be with both of you. And right away, I mean, Foxy off the top. You can't beat that. I worked with him last night. He's still ringing in my ears here. So that's good.
No, the most important question is, if you worked with Foxy last night, did he bring any Patenay with him?
No, he was very good last night. Yeah, very good. That'll become no. That's coming in the third round. Okay. We'll get to it.
All right, Mr. Forslund, please introduce yourself from a career and resume standpoint. 4th season in Seattle after a gazillion with Carolina, and starting with the Hartford Whalers, baby.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I've been blessed. I've had an unbelievable run at this. I love the game. I've dedicated my professional career to hockey. I've done some other sports early in my career, but this goes a long way back for me in terms of how I got into this and why. And what I'm talking about is the broadcasting of hockey. A lot of people play the game. I wasn't afforded that chance as a young man. My son did. My son played a long time. But he was lucky he was afforded opportunity. I was not, but I loved the game by watching it off the television back in a day where we had 6 channels. And I grew up in New England, and the Boston Bruins were the thing. And because of that, and Dan Kelly's voice was the first I heard doing hockey. That's where I got the bug. And if you want, we can talk about it. If not, that's cool too. But it's been a long time, and I've been blessed with a lot of great partners, and still am to this day. So all been good.
And by the way, nothing against you, but right now I would rather be talking to your dad. That's who I would like to be talking to. And put his face where John other face is here.
Well, I wish we could. I wish we could. My dad, Ralph Forslund, was a remarkable guy who loved life and was a self-made guy, enlisted in the Marine Corps at the age of 17, went and fought in World War II, came back to Massachusetts and married his high school sweetheart. They started a life, and my dad had no education and basically was a sales guy, had his own business selling automotive paint supplies around town. Ended up being an executive for a couple of stores. He met someone who owned automotive paint, wallpaper, household goods before, Home Depot and all this stuff. And we actually had these places that could run businesses. He did that. But the sales part of it is this. He was exceptional with people and exceptional at selling anything. And I feel that my career has been an opportunity to sell a great game. I don't have to be sold on it. You guys don't have to be sold on it, but a lot of people do. And and I've always said, if you don't get hockey, then I feel bad for you. And if you do want to take a little time to learn about the game and follow it, then you're onto something great. Greatest game in the world. So my dad was able to take a young boy who had an interest in broadcasting and play calling games off of television into a hobby that I did from like age 8 all the way to 16 when I became too cool for school and didn't want to do it anymore. But my dad did color with me into a little tape recorder, and I broadcasted every single Boston Bruins game I could through those ages, because every game was on television with Orr and Esposito and all those guys via TV 38. We lived 90 miles west of Boston. We had a parabolic antenna with a booster he bought at Sears. We'd pull the games in His buddies would come over. They've had a few adult beverages and listen to little Johnny call the games. And my dad would add his color, and I took it seriously. And I started preparing for games because I wasn't a great reader. So my mom, who was another great influence in my life, said, "You got to read." I said, "Mom, I hate reading." And she made me read books about the history of hockey, which I found fascinating.
Great idea.
I was doing a lot of research. So when I got a chance in the minors in '84, I not only in my own mind did a bunch of games that nobody heard, but I thought I had experience. I thought I had a style. I thought I had a way of preparing to do a game. And I also had an advanced knowledge of the history of sport, by and large through Stan Fischler and all the great books he wrote on the game. So that launched me. It was interesting how I got there. It was just a break and just an odd story through college and whatnot. But anyway, I took off in '84 at the minor league level for 7 years and went to Hartford in '91.
Nice. And how great is that you were able to stay in New England as well, though, right?
Yeah, and that was by accident. I tried for everything and was getting denied. And then I had a meeting with a guy named Peter Cooney. God rest his soul. He passed away last year. Great friend of mine, but he was the owner of the Springfield Indians at the time. And as I was going to go there after grad school as an intern and work in the front office where they had 4 people and do whatever. And he said, "Do you have any on-air experience? Ever broadcast a game?" I said, "Yeah, lots. Yeah, I got a lot." And he never asked me for who or if I had a sample of my
work. I did the exact same thing.
That's how important the job was to him. He only cared about advertising sales. That's the only thing. That's all he cared about. And so last on the list, right, you can relate to it. And it was to actually do the games. So anyway.
Exactly.
I started and learned my craft and learned from a lot of great coaches, Jimmy Roberts in particular, that taught me a lot about hockey and how the game's played. And then he asked me my opinions, which I found fascinating because I had just been I was in my 20s, and we'd be on the bus and he asked me an opinion on the game or players. And I'd ask him, "Jimmy, you're the guy that played for the Montreal Canadiens. You're the guy that was an original St. Louis Blue. You're a legend in this sport. Why do you care what He goes, "Well, I'll tell you what, Scotty Bowman always asked Dan what he thought. Because it's just a different view from a different set of eyes with no bias and really no playing connection. And sometimes your views are completely out of whack. Sometimes they're not too far away from the truth that maybe the hockey person isn't seeing." So that's kind of how analytically I got into the game and learned a lot about the game. And it's helped me out over the years to work with various partners and do kind of my brand of how I call a hockey game.
Yeah, I'm curious, in Springfield, did you grow up with the Springfield Kings when you were a little kid? Okay.
I did.
That was always the Kings minor league team that I sort of followed from LA.
Yeah. So in 1970, the 70-71 season was the first. 1970 was the first game I saw in person. Cleveland Barons, Springfield Kings. Billy Smith in goal, Kings farmhand, before he went off to NHL expansion. And as you know, Billy Smith could fight as well as any skater. But problem was he was the goalie. But he would actually take on guys when the team was down 2-1 and needed a lift. The goalie would fight. And just out of nowhere. It wouldn't be because he got run or anything. He just would fight, and that was cool. But at the end of that season, a young player, 19 years of age, came down from LA to condition because he had mono, and that was Robert Butch Goring. And he came down and lifted that team to the Calder Cup. And I went to every game. And then I continued to go every weekend with my dad. That's where we really bonded. That's where we had conversations about life, were between periods when I was reading the hockey news and watching a Zamboni go around with the no roof on it. You could see the chain and the snow and all that kind of thing. That was the entertainment, right? We didn't have the t-shirt tossing and light shows and mascots or anything like that. But anyway, that's a long time ago. But yeah, the Kings were a big part, and I followed the LA Kings because that was the parent
went up and you wanted to see them.
Yeah, and I would listen to the radio when the Bruins were out west when I wasn't supposed to be doing it. And if I was good and got decent grades, they let me stay up to watch the Seals and the Bruins, the Kings and the Bruins at 10:30 Eastern time.
That's great.
And we had no idea. Only our imagination told us what the Forum looked like, right? It was it was a great thing. Yeah.
And you had no idea I was probably sitting there watching that game.
No idea. No idea.
Of course.
No. No, but today we could correspond the way the world is today. That's what's so great about it. Yeah,
exactly. So John and I have worked at Sports USA together for a while. He's still there and I'm here, but that's a whole different story. 4 years now in Seattle. What's that been like for you?
The best 4 years of my career. And I've seen a lot. I've been privy to a lot. I'm very proud of all the work we did in North Carolina. I never thought I'd leave Raleigh. I never thought I'd be disassociated from the Hurricanes brand and franchise. But things do happen for a reason. At a low point in my career, and the only time in my career I've been really just shown the door, so to speak, I was available. And it was hard for me to deal with. So I had two opportunities, one to go to Tampa, and I was working with NBC independently at the time as a freelancer, and then Seattle. And Todd Leiweke, the CEO of the Kraken, walked me through a process of my life of not having a job, which I never had in pro sports, luckily. Wow. And he helped me through that as much as offer me the position in Seattle. But once I got to Seattle and saw what the team was all about, the franchise, the building, and the fans, it is a great city for sports. And it's a great city in terms of what we do. They've had great relationships with announcers over the years. There have been some legendary people who've gone through Seattle, with the Seahawks and the Mariners and all the teams and the Supersonics. And so to be just part of that at the ground floor was intriguing. And then to light a fire among a fan base as we did in Raleigh and turn people on to hockey was way better for me, I think, than going to a team that was already established. So I'm very happy with the local aspect of my career right now. I plan on being there for a while if they want me back. I hope they do.
They better.
Yeah, I hope so.
I'll be making a few phone calls if they don't.
Yeah, and thank you, Ted. But I don't know. I don't get wrapped up in how the team plays. I have to, but I really are as an announcer. And we went 10 years without the playoffs in Raleigh before this run they're on right now. That's broadcasting for a team. When you are faced with that, what the Ducks guys are going through right now, what the Kings went through for a period of time before they were able to draft all these great players and get on the cycle they went on with the 2 cups and everything. And now they're kind of tracking back to that if they can, right. So, that's where you're really challenged. And that's where we are with the team. It's still in its infant stages. We're chasing down the Golden Knights and how great they've been in a short period of time. That's hard on any expansion team right now, but the situation's been fantastic.
Yeah, they gave up on my buddy Danny Bilesma too, so I'm a little upset about that. But go ahead, John.
John, you mentioned just how tough it was to be shown the door in Carolina. We always hear about what it's like for players to come back and play their first game against the team that they were let go by or had a long history with. What was it like for you as a broadcaster that first time you did a game for Carolina, at least as a member working for the Kraken? Because I think you may have done games for TNT. In between, but it's that first time for the other team in that building.
There's been two surreal. It's a great question, JD. There have been two surreal circumstances with regard to that. The first one was the bubble. Remember, I was the guy who had Rudy Gobert's room next.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that one. Thank you for bringing that up.
I don't know that story.
Yeah, so I was in Detroit. The Jazz had come through and left. Rudy went on, I think, to Oklahoma City. That's where he had a press conference and touched all the microphones and made fun of COVID. And then he got COVID. They shut down everything. And, then what they moved on. The Canes came in to play Detroit. We moved on to New Jersey. It was the next day after we got to New Jersey that the league went on pause, and I got on the team bus to fly back to Raleigh. The PR guy kicked everybody off and came back to me and said, "You were in Rudy Gobert's room. You got to call our team doctor right now." And I went into quarantine for 14 days because I was in the room. Never had any symptoms, couldn't get tested. That's a whole nother deal. But then I then left, and everybody left. And then in June, after I was told something completely different, I was offered a deal that had no negotiation attached to it. I was offered a deal that we could not live on as a family. I was offered a deal that gave me an 83% pay cut, and I didn't think that was very fair. People were taking haircuts during the pandemic for all those reasons, but this one to me was either totally unfair. They just wanted me out. So it appeared they wanted me out. So I said no, and I went to the bubble. And thank God NBC gave me that chance. They kept me going professionally. But that's the first time I saw the Hurricanes face to face, the players and the coaches. I didn't work for them anymore. I couldn't say hello to them because of the pandemic. Everybody had a mask on, and I was going in the Scotiabank Arena to call their first game since. And that was weird. The second thing was coming back to Raleigh with the Kraken. They gave me a video tribute, which was very nice.
That is nice.
I wasn't sure they were going to do that. There's a lot of sensitive things going on here with my departure and all that. Anyway, it was really good. And it's weird, though. It was weird last night, even after all this time.
Yeah.
I don't know how to put it into words. I just know I dumped a lot of equity into the situation in Raleigh, and I'm proud of it. And it feels like it never came to a close. There was no closure. I didn't get a chance to say goodbye to anybody, really. My family's still in Raleigh. They were huge Canes fans. My kids grew up Canes fans, and now this happened. So, listen, I'm not painting a sympathetic.
Right?
I'm not painting a sympathetic thing because I've been blessed. I have a great career, and things are wonderful. But anyway, it's still difficult to come back because you come back and you're kind of not part of this anymore. You know, and there's a part of me that wishes I still was, if I'm totally honest.
Yeah.
Are those the Raleigh birds in the background? Because they are really loud.
Yeah, they love your show. No, they watch all the time. Yeah, they told me.
I thought I'd throw this picture in there while you're here. These are 3 former Badgers of UW in Wisconsin, but we got this picture several years ago, and Chuck Caton, the former longtime radio voice of the Canes, is the guy who I replaced when he left to go to Hartford back in 1979. So I just thought I'd throw that in for you.
Well, all 3 of you are special. The 2 bookends are absolutely incredible. They are absolutely incredible. Chuck
Miller on the left.
Through a kind of a situation, not entirely like mine, but a little bit different the season before. And he was an institution for this franchise. And then you get to Bob Miller. I'll tell you what, here's a good story. I think we're going to call it 78. Okay.
Okay.
Because I think I'm right. But anyway, my dad again took me to Boston to see the Kings and the Bruins. And we sat in the second deck right behind the broadcast pit. Yes. And Bob Miller was there. And my dad said, I'm going to say hello to this Bob Miller, the voice of the Kings. I said, Dad, please. I think I was, 15 years old. So I said, Dad, don't do it. I'm embarrassed, please. Oh, but he did. And he tapped him on the shoulder. And Bob turned around. And he said, Bob, I'd like to introduce you to my son, John. John would like to do what you do someday. Do you have any advice for him? And Bob took about 10 minutes to talk to me, showed me his stuff, did everything. And I never forgot it. But here's the thing. When I broke into the league, I never told Bob until years later, after I was too afraid to say anything when I first started. I didn't see Bob enough because of the geography of the schedule, right? So, and I always was, I'm not that outgoing of a person to force myself on anybody. So the certain legendary figures in broadcasting, I waited for them to talk to me. But Bob always did. So then it was in the playoffs with NBC during the great years for the Kings. I was there a lot. I did a lot of those games. And Bob is so supportive of me. When he was not doing the games, he would text me. He would come and see me. He would tell the great jokes he always tells. But I finally told him, I said, Bob, here's what happened. And it was an emotional moment for both of us. And he still, when I come into town, not all the time, but he does come. And he does come to the booth, and he doesn't have to do that. And he comes to say hello to everybody, but I always take a selfie with him. And thing about Bob Miller, like Doc Emmerich, is they were great announcers, but the people within hockey respected them for who they were. And I hope I'm like that in a way. because I watched them at morning skates. I watched them with coaches. I watched how they asked questions, how they were with the players. When the players are excited to see you as an announcer, that's a good thing.
Yeah. By the way, real quick on Bob Miller, he's the reason that I really got my best start as a play-by-play guy at Wisconsin, because that's where he used to be. And when I came back from an awful gig, my first one in the minors in New England on Cape Cod and also New Hampshire, and back in '78, I got back and I was at a preseason game, and Bob says, "So how was it back there?" And I said, "It's the greatest experience of my life, but I hated the owner, and he was an awful person, and I got the hell out of there, and I don't know what to do." And he says, are you ever thinking about doing college hockey? He goes, "My job just opened up, and that was Caton leaving and going to Hartford." And and I went, but listen to John, when I called them up and said, "Bob Miller told me to call you," they said, "What time can you be here?" It was unbelievable.
Yeah, well, he's royalty, right? You work for the right franchise. I mean, that's it. And again, it's people skills. It's a partnership he had with Nick for a long time. Partnership with Foxy. Yep. I mean, those guys, as you know, when they traveled around. Yeah. Okay, I was just going to say the partnership he had with Nick for years, with Foxy. I mean, those guys would travel around the league, and they did so many great things together, right? Dinners and all those different things. That's the built-in, aspects of the job that are perks. You know, the friendships you acquire and the times you spend together, and those guys can write a book on, and should, on just that. Never mind broadcasting and the exploits of the great teams over the years.
Exactly.
John, you talked about how you ended up in Seattle, and it wasn't something that you had originally planned. Very similar to your partner Ed Olchuk and how he ended up.
And there's Eddie in the middle there
in Seattle and his departure from Chicago. But the two of you together, I mean, what a dream team that is for the Kraken fans. And it still seems that Edzo has the mentality of a player, because I think, if I remember correctly, he took a great deal of pleasure in just ribbing you during a game. I think he felt you were wearing some bowling shoes, if I remember correctly. And that is, they only do it because they know you can take it, and they know that they're not offended. They're having fun. But just what it's like to work with Eddie.
This is a very biased opinion, but I do think, especially at the local level, we take it to a level that nobody else does. And you have to be able to roll with it appropriately and weave it within the game without offending the fans. Keep it entertaining. Don't disparage the game. Don't disrespect what the players are trying to do when you're having a little bit of fun. Eddie is remarkable. Eddie is a remarkable human being. He's a legend in the sport as a player, as a U.S.-born athlete at a time where it was really hard to break into the NHL as an American. The poster boy for Chicago hockey, 18 years of age, incredibly good looking, great smile, great time with the media, would always give people time, was always respectful, and he morphs into another career. Very similar to some of the greats in broadcasting. Like, for instance, most people don't even know John Madden was a player, God rest his soul, don't even know that he coached. They just knew him as the announcer, and then the younger people just knew him as the video game, and that was it, right? Same with Eddie. A lot of people just know of him as a broadcaster because he's the best in the business at what he does. He organically looks at a play and within seconds can decipher exactly what he wants to say, tell the truth, make it make sense for local people without, getting fired on a local broadcast, making sure that your bosses don't get upset with the truth, but also on the national front, telling the why of every play, doing it with great humor, direct approach that people can understand. And then you get to how he is personally. So he's gone through so much in his life, beating cancer. He's as generous as a person I've ever come across. So he's a great friend. And we've done so many games together. And then we got a chance at the end of, not the end of our careers, but near the end, the 13th hole, to finally do games for a team. That's a totally different ball game, and an honor to be with him for this. And you're right. There was a game this year where I have my Cole Haan shoes on, which I think are stylish for a 63-year-old guy. That's my opinion. And he thinks they're bowling shoes because they have the white soles and everything else. And during the game, he got on his hands and knees while I'm calling the game, and I didn't even notice. And took a piece of tape and wrote number 12 on it and taped it to the back of my shoe like they're bowling shoes. And he's making reference to when are you going bowling after the game, Johnny? On a whistle. I'm like, that's the weirdest question I've ever been posed. I said, what are you talking about? I'm driving you home after the game. That's all I know. He goes, no, what time did you book alley time? Anyway, they had filmed it. The production truck had it. All of a sudden it shows up on the screen. There's my heel. There's the 12. And he can't stop laughing, right? And the fans loved it. Great. I loved it. I love having fun with myself. I don't take myself seriously. Anyway, that's how we do it. I love that guy.
I was watching the game that night, and it was pure theater.
That's a great story. Thanks for bringing that up, John. I appreciate it. And I never got to know Ed well because he was in LA for like 10 minutes, right, when he played here. But but he did. I became I guess a recognizable face because I used to stick my microphone in his mouth occasionally towards the end of his career, right? And then when did I see him next? I would see him at the Belmont when I was covering the Triple Crown, and I'd walk up to him and he goes, "I know you." And so that's the only way we've ever known each other that way. So,
well, he's terrific with the ponies.
Oh yeah,
he had a great Kentucky Derby for NBC, and I watch Friday and Saturday mostly to see him and support him and text him and rib him, and when he loses, I just pile on. But he was winning a lot Friday and Saturday, and he did an interview with D. Wayne Lucas, and again, this gets to Eddie's makeup. He respects everyone, and he respects people who came before him. Like he has the utmost respect for Lou Lamoriello. He still calls him Mr. Lamoriello because of what Lou and what impact Lou had on young U.S.-born now team member. Goes all the way back to that. So,
Your Wi-Fi is freezing.
That was that. There you go. So this is watching that interview. He's like a kid in the candy store because he's got arguably the most legendary trainer in the history of horse racing, who's approaching 90 or in and around 90 years old, and he's doing this remarkable interview with him, which is a skill set. He's a handicapper, but he's a great broadcaster. Like he knows how to ask questions. He knows how to get it done. He is an excellent broadcaster.
Okay, so John D. in this case, this is the longest intro we've had to covering any of a series since we've started this show. Yes, we're going to talk hockey too, by the way, not just the history of John Forslund and an incredible broadcasting career. Let's go to the playoffs, boys.
Okay.
And I want to talk a lot about the Toronto series because the Leafs are just an enigma when it comes to, well, we know it's been a long time since they've won a Stanley Cup. And they were like dental floss away from being 3-up in this series. And now it's 2-2, and here we go again. What kind of paranoia is going on in Toronto, do you think, guys?
Well, John, I'll let you start off because you've covered this series, correct?
Yeah, last game.
Yeah, I have. Yeah. I covered the last 2 games of the series for TNT. Yeah, so Eddie and I both with Shane Knighty, we're both all 3 of us on this situation that saw the Panthers display their championship medal, get off the mat, respond to critics, defend their home ice, and play at a level that we're used to seeing last year and most of the regular season. But their drop off at the end of the year had some people doubting. Their dominance over Tampa Bay turned that completely around. And now the way they played physically, I can only tell you, being in the arena watching this, I'm not sure all of the physical play translates to television because a lot of it's out of frame. So there are things going on in back of the play that my analysts can watch because I have to keep my eye on the puck. But I still am looking over here to see what's going on in the corner when the puck's down, approaching the other end of the ice. So it's a terrific series. I really like the Maple Leafs going into the playoffs. I thought they had a real good chance to come out of the East. I had them a lot for Amazon. I was in and around their team from preseason on. We covered them a great deal on Monday nights. So I had access more than usual to their players and certainly Craig Berube, who I've known for a long time. I really think he's done a great job making them a little bit different. How different they are will show up tomorrow night. That will show up in Game 5. This is it. We're either going to see the Maple Leafs differently, and they're going to take a step, and hopefully it's led by Austin Matthews because he needs to wake up, and I'm not sure if he's hurt or not. We'll never know till it's over. But he's been kind of dormant. He doesn't look the same. He's checking well. He's defending well. But he's got to be at the front end of their offensive game. That's obvious. Yeah. And if they don't do it, then what happens with Mitch Marner and what happens with their core and how do they navigate that and how do they change moving forward? Their fans have had enough. Their fans have had enough of being almost there. They really want them to take the next step to the Final Four. Right. But there's Florida with their terrific team game and their variety of ways they can beat you. And if Bob can dial back in, which he appeared to do in the last game, and Joseph Woll was absolutely incredible, right?
Yeah.
But he's as a young goalie, he's got to follow that up in Game 5. It's a different animal. Bob's used to that. Bob's done that. Yep. So that's where I get a little bit scared because I see Bob recovering. And when Bob gets to a certain level, Bobrovsky's off the charts.
Yeah, so he looks like he's himself again. By the way, you mentioned Austin Matthews. Yes, he's struggling offensively, but he's able to speak. Let's hear from him now after Game 4.
Austin, what made it tough to generate offense here tonight?
I think obviously, they're a team that puts a lot of pucks to the net. I thought we didn't do a good enough job of helping our D and executing coming out of the zone, and they were able to kind of sustain ozone pressure throughout the game. And I thought there was times where we were better, but I think just consistently over the 60 minutes they outworked us and outplayed us in that area.
What did you think from Joe's?
I thought he was great. I mean, they got some good chances. He helped keep it 1-0 game there for the most part on some plays that we can't let happen. So I thought he was great tonight.
Austin, what was your takeaway from the penalty kill in this one?
I mean, pretty good, but obviously, you spend half the game in the box. It's hard to generate momentum. It's hard to generate energy and life for the bench. So that's on us to be, more disciplined in all those areas because, they're a good team on special teams, but, obviously it's special teams is such a big part of the game, especially in the postseason, so it's hard when you're killing a lot.
How do you guys get back to your game, heading back home?
I mean, I think just resetting it a couple days here, couple days here to reset. We knew it wasn't going to be easy. We're playing the defending Cup champs. They're a good team. Both teams took care of home ice. So here we are. We just got to continue to push, clean up some things, get better in different areas, and, going back on home ice, be excited about that.
One more. Feeling a bit snake bit right now? How are you feeling about your game?
A little bit. I mean, the chances have been there. I think I just got to do a better job of bearing down on some of them. But I think for the most part, throughout the 4 games, I mean, we've been winning shifts, generating chances. Against tough matchups, but obviously you want to score, I want to score, but continue to get these opportunities and just capitalize and go from there.
So that's Austin Matthews, and that's one of your favorite pets to talk about there, Mr. Davis, Matthews, and what he doesn't bring to a team, not what he does bring. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, a lot to dissect. I mean, look, the numbers, Austin Matthews at the end of the day, he's got 10 points in 10 games. He's actually got more points than Alexander Barkov. The difference is that for me, one, Barkov's got a Stanley Cup ring, and Austin Matthews, he's got 10 points. He's only got 2 goals, and he's not paid for helpers. He's paid for goals. And John, I've kind of felt that, the problem with Matthews and Marner is that neither of them go to the dirty area, and you could get away with that more so in the regular season than you can in the playoffs. And I think that's been a big problem for Toronto. I thought Game 4 they got away from their game. What made them so successful for the first, I'd say, 9 games of the playoffs. For all the penalties they took in the first period, the Domi thing didn't bother me from the standpoint that his hit on Barkov, if it was Sam Bennett had the chance to hit Matthews or Marner, he would have done it. But I just think that plays into Florida's hockey game. Like, I don't think that's what you want to do. And I'm not, for me, Joseph Woll, I think, could probably start for at least 10 NHL teams. This is a guy last year that Game 5 and Game 6 against Boston was outstanding, got them to a Game 7. He's got a .925 save percentage and a goals against average just over 2 in the playoffs. So I'm not concerned. I'm just more concerned that their 2 best players in Matthews and Marner, just the playoffs are not their type of hockey game. And I've used the line, John, that they like to win, but they don't hate to lose. And I want to see them hate to lose.
Yeah, I think those are, I think those are fair comments. Here, it's interesting. In the first 2 games, Matthews saw Barkov all the time. Okay. And Toronto gets the last change. So I guess they can live with that. When it got back to Florida, Maurice, for the most part, gets the last change. Well, he gets the last change, but for the most part, put Lundell's line out against Matthews, 5-on-5. And that was nullification of Austin Matthews. It took away Lundell, Luostarinen, and Marchand, some of their offensive play that they had in the first 2 games because they weren't playing in that situation, but they were checking the heck out of them and they couldn't break it. They couldn't 5-on-5, right? And, there's one chance that Matthews had early in the game in Game 4 where he's alone on the near side and the shot looked relatively pedestrian. It was a good glove save. I think I made a big deal about the save, and when you look at it, it probably could have been elevated more. So there's more there. There's more that he has to get to. But my point is, what happens next? And is he good enough to fight through Barkov's checking again? You're asking him to play straight on against a reigning Selke Trophy winner. I don't know. And then there's Marner with his 102 points and his 75 assists. And I will say, Marner's a great penalty killer. They both are. They use him that way. But they're going to have to. They're going to have to get to it when it's over if they lose and figure that whole dynamic out because it's run its course. And maybe the only player, maybe they got to get away. Maybe it's Nylander. I don't know. Again, I thought Nylander, my own opinion, I thought Nylander was soft in Florida. Okay. There were a few plays where he's pulling up and nobody wants to be hit. I get it. And he doesn't have to play through a lot of that because he's expected to be elite and he has 6 goals. So he has done his thing. He has delivered. The onus for me is on Matthews in Game 5. It's how much of a difference maker he's going to be. And again, you'd like to see a little bit more disdain and after the game than maybe that's what we're seeing, right? And they're not sweeping this one under the rug if they lose. They can't. They're not. There could be executive changes. There could be a lot of things. Maybe not tree living, but maybe above him. Who knows? There could be a whole different direction coming for the Leafs should they lose in this round because they're done. I can tell you from being up there.
Yeah.
This is not good enough.
All right, Davis, hang on a second. Let's hear from the head coach of the Leafs, Craig Berube.
Joe really kept you guys in there, held you guys in. What'd you make of his performance tonight?
Yeah, he was great. I thought he played an excellent game. All those PPs they had in the first, and he was a big reason that it was only 1-0.
You've stressed discipline.
Yeah.
But like you said, between the whistles as well. Just some of the stick penalties, the interference penalties, how frustrating is that?
That is, we don't need to take those, Hookings and, interference, we got to be better. We'll be smarter than that. But in the end, I really liked our physicality, our compete out there. Guys played hard. It's a tough series. They're a very good team. We know that, and it's a battle.
Craig, when you call it a battle, do you feel like enough of your guys were engaged at the level they need to be, or do you need maybe a bit more in that area?
I thought most guys were engaged. I thought, they were, going good. Like, yeah, there's always, there's guys that could do more for sure, and we're going to need more out of them. So we'll figure that out and handle that.
Okay, so that is the coach. Hang on a quick second. I got to turn this off. Yeah, go ahead.
Just want to say with Matthews, I think, I'm not a doctor here, but John, he took a shot off the hand in that Ottawa series.
Yeah.
And I don't think, I'm guessing that maybe that's something that he is dealing with.
Yeah.
But you mentioned Berube earlier and your fondness for him. The approach that this Leafs team has had, I look back at the game where the Stolar's injury and all the talk about dirty hit and so on and so forth. And I love Berube's approach for the next game because it kind of reminded me of back when he was coaching the Blues and you had the hand pass with Carlson against San Jose, and he immediately said, "It's over. On to the next game." And they ended up winning, I think, the next 3 or 4 games and, advanced and won the Cup. I think he's the perfect fit for a lot of teams and definitely this Maple Leafs team.
Oh, he absolutely is. And he's one of these guys who we saw what he was as a player, and it's hard to shake a reputation when you see how tough he was. And you automatically think he's old school, he's tough, he's all of that. He's also very intuitive. He's also a deep thought guy. He's also sensitive, and he understands today's players. He and I, before he got unfortunately fired in St. Louis, Panger and I were on a game for TNT out in Denver. We got to spend some time with Chief and talk to him. And he's talking about today's athletes because they're way different, right? The world's different. And you just have to approach younger players in a way where they understand where you're coming from, because they'll just tune you out if you give them too much old school. So he gets all that. Brindamore is very good with that with the Hurricanes. So what happens next? I think some of it's on Craig Berube to get matchups he wants, figure out a way to show his team a solution, in the 5th game. And then the other thing is one of these guys or all of them have to do something at the beginning of the game where the bench goes, and if it's Matthews, great. If the bench says, okay, Poppy's leading the way here, he's on. They got to have a moment. I don't know if they've had moments like this in the series. When Florida was down in game 3, 2-0. Yes, it goes off Riley's stick, but that's a great play by Barkov to come out of the corner and just will the puck to the front of the net. Somehow they earn the bounce and it goes in. Game changes. Game changes. That has to happen for the Leafs. Tavares has been very good, but again, he's got to be next. He can't be first, in my opinion. Matthews, Nylander, Marner, those are the guys that have to give Florida a seed of doubt. I'm not sure Florida has that. They went home and did what they needed to do. The winking was going on at the end of the game. Hey, somebody shoves a player down at the end of the game. That's hockey, and I'm glad we moved on from
baby.
that.
What do you mean that's hockey?
Right. That's right. Right. And Chief's right. The elbow on Marner from Kulikov was worse, So he's not going to have a problem with a scrum at the horn because you want to send a message. We used to have that all the time in hockey. We don't have it as much anymore. They just kind of go to the room and the game's over. But there's always a way. We see it in the regular season and blowouts. It for our old schoolers out there, it blows us away because there was always a price to pay if you beat the team 5-0. Now they just get on to the next game. That's the nature of the way the sport is today.
It's interesting you say that because I guess Tkachuk has been sort of barking back and forth about I'm going to get you the next game is what we sort of are hearing, right? I mean, I don't believe that.
And in game 3, before Barkov scored, the Leafs were up 2-0. Marchand went right at Domi. And Shane Knighty is right there, and the best he could, in the cleanest way he could, articulated what was being said. and Marchand was chirping Domi about his dad, and your dad's here,
wow.
and you're in his shadow, and and
during
those
the game
are the
he
things.
was doing this.
Oh yeah, well, yes, and this is where the Leafs have to do some of that without being ridiculous.
Yeah,
the penalties that Berube talks about are interesting because Jacques Lemaire always told me, if you're taking stick foul penalties, interference penalties, that means you're out of position. That means you're not playing good defensive hockey. So the Leafs have to clean that aspect up. They also have to show a willingness to push back a little bit within their discipline.
Yeah, that's the word, though. Discipline is what it's all about.
Yeah. I'd like to see that Domi hit, though, John, in the course of the game and not at the end of the game.
Yeah, it's really senseless at the end. You're right. It's senseless. Totally and that's my point, JD and Ted, is that in the fifth game, let's see it in the first period. You're at home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Don't let
a great line. Someone chirped Wayne's brother saying, you're not as good as your dad. And his brother responded back saying, well, neither are you.
Nobody is.
Right.
Nobody. Right.
By the way, can I ask a quick Brindamore question, or do you want to wait?
Before we get to that series, let's hear from Coach Maurice in Florida, who's become one of my favorite Hollywood characters over the last few years.
Paul, first, just update, scary moment there with Barkey at the end. Is he going to be okay, you think?
Yeah, we think he'll be all right.
Tonight's game, it looked like more so than any other ones in the series. You guys played your brand of hockey for majority of the game. What would you attribute the switch to that you guys were able to do your thing tonight more than the other games?
I'm not a momentum believer at all. We had a few good shifts, I think, early. We didn't get scored on in the first 35 seconds. That was a nice change for us. But we're mindful that it's one game. I don't believe in momentum. I don't believe in trends. Puck will drop the next game, and we'll have to fight hard to get back to what I thought was a pretty well-played game by our team.
Carter Verhaeghe, we've talked a lot about during the regular season having a lot of chances, things not going in. Last game helped set up the Marchand game winner, and then today gets you guys the first goal in the power play. Just to see him looking like himself, like he usually does in the playoffs.
I would say.
I'm Kristi Noem, the United States Secretary of Homeland Security.
That was a bad edit. I don't know what
President
the heck happened there. Okay. He's coming back.
Through 9 games, Carter has been our most consistent forward. And playoff hockey is hockey. He understands. It resonates with him. It's played at an incredibly high pace. It's very physical. And that's where he is at his best. Everything kind of falls in line for him. All his reads are right. All his physicality is right. He's plays a very hard, very fast game, and he needs the game sometimes to be hard and fast for him to excel. I think he's been our most consistent player through 9 up front.
There you go. So that's Coach Maurice. And as we wrap up that series, guys, before you get to anything with Carolina, I want to talk real quick about something that John Davis knows a little bit about. But Forslund, you have no idea that there is a curse on the Maple Leafs that nobody talks about because they don't know it exists. Most of them aren't old enough to even know it. You do know that the LA Kings, when they were an expansion team, they were run by this guy, right? Jack Cook.
Yeah.
Look at the hat. Look at the hat he's wearing.
Yeah.
It's a Toronto Maple Leafs hat from 1,000,000 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. An old logo with a T in the middle of a leaf. Okay, and then he got a franchise and he started it in Los Angeles. And what did he do? He built the Forum, and he also made sure that his first pick overall in the expansion draft of 67-68 was Terry Sawchuk, who had just won a Stanley Cup with the Toronto Maple Leafs. And what else did Mr. Cook do? He hired Red Kelly to be the first coach after he'd never coached a day in his life because he just played defense for the winning Toronto Maple Leafs. So there is a long thing. There's Sawchuk with the cup in Toronto, loving every second of it with his family. And there he is there with his other goaltender, which you guys know, and playing goal for the Kings and the Leafs. And, I guess he's supposedly the greatest goalie who ever lived, certainly to that generation. And here's my ticket to the first game I ever went to. It was Game 7 of the Kings and the Minnesota North Stars, who destroyed the Kings in Game 7, 9-4. There were probably about 12,000 people at the Forum that day, and the bottom line was, when I'm on the bench, and we'll talk about that another time. I'm actually on the bench at the start of the third period when the Kings are down by like 7 goals. And Terry Sawchuk skates over, looks at me like, who the hell are you? And why are you standing next to the sticks? It's a long story, but anyway, the curse continues, guys. Since and there's Sawchuk at he's right there in the middle there of the original Kings. Anyway, it's a fun personal story to tell. What can I say?
Hey, John, I know that Evan Rodriguez has a propensity for, he's considered a diver, but have you ever seen a guy get an embellishment penalty getting his staple to the glass?
No, that one there was really puzzling. That there have been a few calls, non-calls, but that one there stands out as what are they talking about? It's unbelievable. First of all, oh boy, I feel a lot of these things when you're officiating, you're creeping into the head of an athlete, and you're determining a rule.
Yeah,
I don't know. You know, I never really get to that. I think if you hit somebody from behind, it's a penalty. You know, if he goes into the boards, it's hard to differentiate if that player is embellishing, because it doesn't take much to get hurt. Sometimes it takes a lot to get hurt. And I think by and large, most of these players realize too that they're going to embellish on most plays. I mean, if you feel a stick anywhere near your skates, aren't you going down? I mean, that, right? So, but that one there, I just look at the play itself. I have a hard time with coming up with embellishment. I just, that was amazing. I don't know.
You had a question about what did you say, Brindamore?
Yeah, I mean, John, for me, it's never an official Carolina Hurricanes game until Rod's eyes, pop out of the socket. His facial expressions on the bench and the interview that he did with Jody Shelley, and how ironic on that game on the weekend where he said our team, he didn't like the way the team was playing, and it was maybe 30 seconds later that they score. But I love watching Rod on the bench.
Well, he's great. He had the famous one, I think it was last season up in Edmonton. I was on the game. We should 50-0. We should be losing 50-0, and they got beat 6-1 that night. I've known him a long time, obviously. He's never changed, and he never will. And it's the same guy, same approach, same unbelievable laser focus that he delivers to everything he's done and will do. By and large, the buy-in he gets from his players is incredible. It's just a hard way to play. It's not for everybody. You have to get the right personnel to play that system. And he demands it, but he demands it in a respectful way that the players will basically go through anything to play for him. He does get anxious with officiating. He does complain about every call, it seems. It puzzles his former college roommate at times, Wes McCauley, who says, "What's happened to my boy Rod here? He's all over me." But I said to Wes, this was back in the bubble, I said, "Wes, you're no different than everybody else that wears stripes." That's just the way he is. He's an incredibly passionate guy, and a hell of a coach. He's a great coach.
It seems like he'd be a wonderful guy as a friend too.
He's a great friend, and he'll do anything for people. And he's like most of them, he's done a lot without any, notoriety for it. A lot of things have been quietly done. And it's funny that he's Mr. Carolina, because when he first came to Carolina in the trade, he was sour. He'll be the first guy to tell you that. And he also wasn't sure about here and what this was like, because it didn't appear that anybody was interested in hockey. And he came from Philadelphia. So the Raleigh market had to be sold on him, and it was. And then they started to, he and Ron Francis did a great job, putting the team on the map. And then Rod, once he came out of the second lockout, the canceled season, with a C for the first time in his career, he went to another level as a player and a leader. and he is the Hurricanes. I mean, he really is. There are no statues right now in front of that building, but there should be one, and it should be him. Yeah.
What a moment it must have been for him to have his son score a goal with him behind the bench.
Yeah. I happen to be back in town for that and watching the game. And I've known Skylar since he was a little boy. And Skylar, I believe, is my son was a 97 birth year. Skylar's a 99. They're close, but they never played together in AAA hockey, but they trained a lot in the summers. And Rod would give his time, and Johnny McLean, when he was here, would give his time to the kids and put them through workouts. And Skylar was very quiet growing up, unassuming, worked really hard. That's not a surprise, and has had a long journey. And a lot of people will say, well, the name got him. That's always what they go to, right? The name got him somewhere. Skylar, was never an easy choice to play at any level. He had to earn everything he had. Went out to the BCHL and did well before Quinnipiac. Won a national championship there, but played all 4 years. Had to sign as a free agent. Weren't a lot of teams that were interested, but had a decent season in the American League this year. Earned the call up, and then for him to score, it was great for the Brindamore family. I know that, but it was great for all of us who not only still have an attachment, affinity for the franchise, but the youth hockey in the area. So that's why I got emotional, because I've seen these kids. My boy was the first ever AAA squirt part of that first team. Riley Stillman was a teammate, and they used to go out and just get destroyed by Little Caesars and all the Chicago Mission and all those great legendary programs. But they took their lumps and they kind of carved it out, and look what's happened in LA over the years. But it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of generations to get to a high level of youth hockey, and Skylar's part of that.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned LA. I mean, it's funny, Dustin Wolf was Rob Blake and Nelson Emerson coached Dustin Wolf as a junior king.
Right.
He goes out and beats him twice this year.
Right. It takes that long, it takes almost 20 years for the cycle to start with youth hockey, and then have enough players that stay in an area to coach. That always helps. St. Louis has that going for them. Look what Phoenix has done. Yeah. It's amazing. What's happened. It's just too bad what happened to the NHL franchise, but you turn out the types of players, and we talk about Matthews, but Matthew Nyes, I mean, there's a lot, Trevor Moore, Thousand Oaks. I mean, it's just, the Robertsons, it's really cool. And there's plenty more coming. So that's a good thing.
And thank you, Wayne Gretzky, because if he wasn't traded here to LA, it would have taken a few more decades for that to happen.
Well, and Ted, the other thing about Wayne Gretzky, and it sickens me to see some of the people, soil his reputation, because I don't buy it, I'm not going to go on a political rant, but I don't care about politics, okay? And the thing about Wayne is this. He played every single preseason game until maybe the end of his career, and he played it everywhere. He was in Florida before hockey came to Florida. He was playing at Caesar's Palace. He was playing in all kinds of places where they tried the game, and his teams would come through, the Oilers and the Kings, and he had to play. Nobody really forced him, but he knew it was a responsibility, and he played all those games.
Yeah, he got that from his dad, by the way.
Yeah,
his dad. Yeah. He made sure he pounded into his brain as a kid, like, everybody's here to see you.
Yeah,
and you need to live up to just being you.
I went to see him play in Springfield when he was 17 with the Indianapolis Racers against Gordie Howe. And the Whalers, because the roof collapsed in Hartford, were playing, at the Civic Center in Springfield, their games, and that was in the WHA. So he had that down from the beginning. And to me, along with his obvious records and everything else that he's accomplished, the ambassadorship of Wayne Gretzky that continues is something that you should never say anything bad about Wayne Gretzky in this guy's opinion.
Yeah, and I don't think there's anybody else in any sport that comes close to his ambassadorship.
Yeah.
No, there isn't. There isn't, because there's been great players, obviously, who have let their actions do the talking. But when it comes to, hey, can you play tonight in a preseason game? No, heck, we've got load management in the NBA in the regular season. They don't want to play in the regular season anymore. Never mind, preseason games like this. Back in a time where, in the preseason, players were trying to earn a reputation with their fists. Like, those games were not an easy walk in the park. There were guys who had no business playing with an NHL uniform on, trying to make an impression.
Yeah, I used to say on my broadcast that they're literally fighting for their jobs at that time.
And they did. And they did. It was just a different time, and he had to play through all of that, which was remarkable that he did.
Well, and just to kind of bring it forward, I think it's incredible, like World Hockey Championships right now, that Sid, Nathan McKinnon, and Marc-Andre Fleury are all out there playing for Canada. I mean, look, I understand it for Fleury. This is his last kick at the can. I was shocked that Sid, was the first one to go, just with all that he's had to deal with physically this year. That he would go play for his country, and I'm sure that Nathan McKinnon every day is telling Sid, "Hey, it's a rebuild in Pittsburgh. It ain't rebuilding in Colorado. You need to come here."
Yeah, and that could be something that we see. I think Dubas is going to have to act on that before long. To kind of get that franchise pointing back in the right direction. You bring up Crosby, and I think he shares another, and along with their athleticism to Wayne, is the fact that Sidney Crosby, as you guys know, had time for everybody too in the media, and you could actually go in the room and sit down with Sid and talk to him in the morning skate. And it wasn't like he was racing to get to the trainer's room. Maybe he was, but he was always respectful. So as an old guy who's been in the league a long time, those morning skates are priceless. They used to be far better than they are today. You used to be able to go in and really talk to the guys. And it was almost like they wanted to talk to you too, because you could talk about what was going on in the league. They don't need us anymore, because it's easier to get all the information, off your computers, off your phones or whatever, or they don't care.
We had some of this discussion last week, by the way.
Or they just
don't
trust us, anymore. And it is generational. It is different. But
that's been my argument out here. I've pointed that out to the Kings organization that, Crosby, as you just mentioned, it seems more times than not, he is available to the media. We don't have that same luxury out here in Los Angeles with our leaders on a regular basis. And it just, Sid's a special one.
It's frustrating. It's frustrating. I'm telling you that today, most of my interactions with guys are, if I'm lucky enough to see them in the hallway independently from the rooms, if I have any kind of past history with them, helps. And even with my own team, most of the real good conversations are in hotel lobbies, are on the tarmac. It's not in the stall. I don't even bother with my own team. I don't even bother with my own team going to the room anymore, because everybody's cherry picked out for 5 or 6 cliches, and they're all available online. Quite frankly, I don't want to disrespect the profession anymore of what the PR people do, but I don't need it. I don't need any of that to do a game anymore. We used to, but the players are still great. Like, they're great young men, and they're great to be around. And I've covered a few women's games too in my time, and they're great to be around too. But you got to get them in a position where there's trust. And for some reason in the room, certainly in front of a backdrop, there is it's ridiculous. And so
this is a long story, but you can't build trust if you don't have access to them. So
that's right. That's right. And it's hard, and you want to make sure. But I mean, we're also trying to cover playoff series today where both teams practice at the same time.
Yeah.
And then the teams are lucky. The teams are great to us and in the playoffs. And are great with the coaches. We do get private time with them, but you just forget it. You're not talking to the players. That's just the way it is. It's unfortunate.
Yeah. Johnny, we got we're going way too long here. So let's real quick. Let's talk about, we got one game here tonight.
Okay.
And Let me get this thing here. There we go. Stars and the Jets. Your thoughts on that? And we got John Davis, who's trying to make us a living here, and I know a lot of people have to go back to the ATM because of last week's choice. But he finally had one of his rare losses on this show last week. So come up with something good, would you, Davis?
Okay, so tonight we're going to go with the Dallas Stars to score at least 3 goals tonight, and the Dallas Stars to win by at least 2 goals tonight. Connor Hellebuck has given up 3 or more goals in I think it's 10 of his last 11 road games, 4 more in 9 of his last 11 road games, and in his 10 road losses, Dallas or Winnipeg has lost by at least 3 goals 9 times.
Wow.
Yeah, this is striking. I'm not going to say shocking, but this narrative's never going to change.
True.
Unless he changes it. So, it's too bad. It's too bad because he's obviously a great goalie. But I did game 1 of the St. Louis series and said during the game that, until proven otherwise, he may say that he's better for his last season. He's better for 4 Nations. He's better, but he hasn't been. That's like Matthews. Like you haven't been, whatever the reason is. Here it might be between the ears. That's all we can speculate, because how does this happen? When you're elite, when you're 3-time Vezina winner, right? You're going to win this year.
Exactly.
So I don't know. Your regular season numbers put you in the Hall of Fame, I guess, but the playoff numbers right now, I've never seen anything like this.
I was going to
ask you guys recall a great goalie over the years who wasn't good in the playoffs?
You took the words right out of my mouth, John. I was going to ask both of you your thoughts on who do you compare this to?
Nobody.
I can't think of anybody.
Yeah, no, I can't either. And it was interesting. Blake Wheeler is on the Hockey Night in Canada panel this round of the playoffs, and he was saying that for him going in, he said Game 7 against St. Louis is not the defining game for Connor Hellebuck. It's Game 3 on the road is going to be the defining game for Connor Hellebuck, because he has to win on the road. And no, I can't think of a goalie. I made the comparison last night on NHL Network Radio that for me the closest comparison would be Matthews and Marner's performance come playoff time would be equivalent.
Well, by the way, I have a different sport comparison. Barry Bonds was like that for a long time.
Yeah,
Barry Bonds, the greatest all-around player you could ever imagine, with or without steroids. But when it came to the playoffs, he did nothing until the last couple of years, and he was doing the juice then. It's not all about that, but you know what I'm saying. That's the only other person I can think of.
But what you would say to that is, again, baseball is an individualized team sport, where, he's an outfielder and, he's going to have his moments. Maybe somebody else can help. In our sport, if the goalie isn't it,
you're in trouble.
Yeah.
That's it, right? And so as fans, I've always felt watching great goalies, the feeling I get from watching a great goalie is confidence. So when you're covering Jonathan Quick back in the day, nothing was going in. And you were like, okay, this is just the way he is. When Marty Brodeur was dialed in, nothing was going in the net. No matter how they played as a team, and people talk about that. Patrick Waugh, Eddie Belfour, Curtis Joseph. I mean, you can go down the list. And Joseph, had his moments. He had other moments you'd like to see back. He's not in the same realm as some of these other guys.
Right.
But when you talk about yesteryear and Sawchuk and all these other names, they played in the playoffs. I mean, that's it.
Yep.
John, I'll tell you, the one name that does kind of come to mind, and maybe he's changing the narrative this year, but is the guy that you covered for many years in Carolina, and that's Freddie Anderson. Team come playoff time, like I always felt it wasn't because the Canes couldn't score, it was because Freddie couldn't make a save. He hasn't had to make many in this series against Washington, but I think maybe that's the closest.
as we get older, right? As we get older, and you guys are
older.
no, as we get older, you can become more carefree, right? You're kind of like, I can have an opinion, and but when we're younger, we're a little bit reserved because we don't have the confidence. Now, my point to get to Freddie Andersen is this: in his position with his career, maybe now that he's been kicked a lot, okay? He's been criticized a lot. He's been hurt a lot. Yeah. So now he's healthy. He's always been exceptionally talented, even going back to the Ducks. Yeah. He's a guy who, and I've talked about him in other interviews today a lot, is he makes the position look easy. And because he's so technically sound, he doesn't battle like Quickie did, right? He kind of looks like a robot, and he can be a really good robot. But when the pucks go in on Freddie Andersen, he's off his mark a little bit, or it's a 5-hole goal, it looks like he doesn't care, and he gets criticized. But then you get to Anaheim a little bit, and Toronto mostly. The mental anguish he's gone through. How long does it take to get over that? Yeah. How long does it take to play in Toronto as a goalie? It's like being the goalie in Philadelphia. If you're not Bernie Parent and Pelle Lindbergh, maybe a little bit of Hextall, they're the team that said no to Bobrovsky, right? So, they've been searching for a goalie since. It's a hard market, though. It's a hard market to be the goalie. Toronto, it's a hard market to be the goalie. It's taken him a while, and so he's had his criticisms in Carolina. Maybe now he doesn't care. Yeah. Maybe now he's healthy, and he said, here we go. He just got an extension. He's going to play another year. He's 35. Yeah. Okay.
Enjoy the ride, right?
The team is so good in front of him. He just needs to do his job. And right now, he's the best goalie in the playoffs, in my opinion.
Yeah. And that's fair. Okay. Yeah.
All right. Well, we've gone way longer than we normally go. But Forslund,
this was fun.
You got a ton of stories. I can listen to them forever. We're going to have you on another time. And I'd like to get you on my regular show, too, sometime to talk a little more history.
I love you guys.
Congratulations to your son, John.
Thanks, That's JD. Awesome. Thank you very much. We're proud of him.
All right. Say hello to my friends at Sports USA the rest of the way. All right.
Okay, I will. Take care, guys.
Take care.
Right.
Keep up
Johnny
the great
Forslund,
work.
everybody. Appreciate it. We'll see you next week, Tuesday. Stanley